Funerals in the world's most dangerous city, Juarez in Mexico. Mourning for some of the young people killed in a recent massacre as the country's drug war escalates, and CNN's Rafael Romo explains.
They were here, teenagers enjoying a soccer game and a party, when at least a dozen armed men closed off the neighborhood and busted in, killing at least 16 and wounding 12 more. Relatives rushed to the scene, only to see their loved ones bleed to death, including this grandfather of one victim.
I was holding my grandson in my arms when he died. Paramedics arrived and realized there was nothing they could do.
Yet another unexplained slaughter in Juarez, across the border from Texas, now widely called the murder capital of the world. Drug violence last year claimed the lives of more than 2,600 in this city of 1.5 million people. Most were victims of drug trafficking and a war between competing cartels. It's not yet clear if this weekend's victims were too, but witnesses say the gunmen arrived in 7 SUVs with tinted windows.
A group of armed men arrived at the site of the party. They blocked the streets and exits and opened fire against the partygoers.
The violence in Juarez is rising. 230 have already died this year, despite a military crackdown. President Felipe Calderón last year deployed 7,000 troops and 2,000 police officers to Juarez.
I know that in many parts of Mexico, criminals continue to harass, threaten, and practice extortion against many Mexican families. For that reason, we will continue to combat all criminal groups in the country without distinction.
Now Calderón's government claims significant victories against drug cartels. In December, powerful drug baron Arturo Beltrán Leiva died in a shootout with the Mexican military in central Mexico. And last month, police captured Teodoro García Cimental, one of the most brutal drug lords and leader of the Tijuana cartel. But many say the human toll of President Calderón's war on drugs is too high.
Dudo mucho que 7,000 muertos anuales.
I very much doubt that we can speak about success when we're having 7,000 deaths every year. At this pace, we're going to end up having more killings than they have in Iraq.
By some estimates, 450,000 Mexicans are involved in drug trafficking, which generates about $20 billion in sales every year. Those profits rival the auto, tourism, and oil industries. That means the drug business is deeply woven into Mexican society, raising the question, can Mexico rip it out without tearing itself apart?
Dramatic facts, dramatic statistics there, and that was CNN's Rafael Romo reporting. And joining me now, Ruben Beltran, who is Mexico's Consul General here in New York, and Jorge Castañeda, Mexico's former foreign minister. Thank you both for joining me. Let me ask you first, since you represent the government here today, militarization, is it working? Look at this map we have. Maybe we can get an overhead shot of it. There seems to be a spreading of these cartels all over the country, whether it's up here, whether it's here, here, here. 6 large concentrations all over. So what's working about the strategy, Mr. Beltran?
I would say the following. On the one hand, we are facing a fragmented enemy. And they're becoming more and more violent since we are being successful to disrupt their activities and their actions. And what we're witnessing right now is maybe the peak of that violence. And one thing is for sure, we are in crunch time. And let me just assure you that the Mexican government is not going to relinquish its duties to confront organized crime. And that's what's happening right now. And what is happening is also they're using the military because you are at the same time reconstructing the police corps. And by using the military, we are able to tackle and disrupt these activities. That's why they're becoming more and more violent.
So do you buy that? The sort of, they are being tackled, therefore they're becoming more violent?
I think the ambassador and the government's stance at the beginning of President Calderón's term made sense. It was a lot early 2007.
But you mean the militarization?
The fact that the number of deaths is a symptom of success. 3.5 years on, 17,000 deaths later, 900 just in the month of January, the highest level ever. It's hard for me, quite honestly, and I think for many Mexicans, to accept that the more deaths we have, the more successful the strategy is. after 3.5 years now of the strategy.
So what's wrong with the strategy?
I think what's wrong with the strategy in the first place is to have taken on the cartels so quickly when they began. They should have thought it through more clearly. Who do they want to take on first? What are the assets the government has? Does it have a police force? Ambassador Beltran says very rightly that this government, like the previous two, is trying to reconstruct the police force, which means we don't have one. Well, you've got to figure that out. Is the Army really up to this? Does it know how to do this? Is it trained for this? Does it have the weapons, the intelligence, the software? Doesn't. I think President Calderon rushed into this, and now we're paying the consequences.
I will contend that the military is perfectly trained to do these kind of things. And on the other hand, which is the alternative? Are we going to raise the white flag? Are we going to surrender? Are we going to surrender the ability of the government to look for the rule of law and secure the rule of law? I don't think there's another alternative. The monopoly of use of force pertains to the state, and the state is the one who should use the force to secure the stability of the country.
Now, one of the officials in Juarez is basically saying that they've left Juarez totally alone. There's a total absence of authority, this despite the fact that the army's there. Also saying that the people of Juarez are not necessarily predisposed to cooperating with the army. So is that strategy working?
I do believe it is working, and I do believe strongly. One thing is for the Mexican people to fear violence. Everybody would we would all like the violence to diminish or disappear. But that's not realistic at this point.
You used to be Consul General in some of these border states, in Arizona, in California. The current U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security was also governor of Arizona. Here's what she said in regards to the weapons flow. Your President Calderon blamed for this violence.
It's a significant number of the guns used in this wave of violence in northern Mexico absolutely come from the United States. That's why part of our plan is increasing the number of agents who are going to inspect southbound vehicles. That's why we're sending technology to the border that will allow us to scan or do non-invasive x-rays to see whether cars are carrying assault weapons, other kinds of weapons that are now flowing into Mexico to fuel these drug cartels.
I know you obviously agree with what she's saying.
Secretary Napolitano is absolutely right. In order for Mexico to be successful in this war, we need to increase cooperation with the United States to stem the flow of cash, bulk cash, weapons and ammo from the United States to Mexico.
What's wrong with that logic?
I flew to San Diego from Mexico City last week and crossed from San Diego back into Tijuana where I had a speech to give. And someone drove me. There was not the slightest inspection of any car crossing from north to south on the U.S. side or on the Mexican side. A year after Secretary Napolitano's statement, March 25th, 2009.
So why not?
They're not, because they can't do it, Christian. It's too expensive. The local communities don't want it. It backs up queues all the way, tens of miles north, the same way as in the south. They're not going to do it. This has been a full year now. Is it desirable? We could argue about whether it's desirable. I'm not sure it is. But I am sure that they're not doing it. That's a fact.
All right, so if they're not doing it, here's another thing that the president said, President Calderon. We sit right next to the biggest drug consumer in the world.
Well, but Christian, why is it practically legal in Los Angeles, 100 miles north? There are 1,000 public legal dispensaries of medical marijuana in Los Angeles, more than public schools. So what are you saying, that
it should be legalized in Mexico?
Of course it should be legalized in both countries, but what's ridiculous is for us in Mexico to shoot ourselves to stop marijuana from entering the U.S., and 100 miles north, it's sold legally in Los Angeles.
But the thing is that, to be fair, there's only one sort of very limited area in the United States.
California is not that limited. It's kind of big.
It's kind of big. It's big, but as you know, there's a big debate in this country about precisely this.
But I also know California is a big state and a leading indicator state.
True, but can you imagine legalizing cocaine in Mexico?
That's a completely different story, and that deserves a separate discussion.